Hello, my name is Will Prince. I'm the Director of Development and Membership with the Louisiana Trust for Historic Preservation. Today we are continuing our series in Profiles in Preservation, and today we're learning about the Graves Homeplace in Caldwell Parish. This homeplace is in the process of renovation, and today we will learn more about that process from John Stubbs. Good morning, John. How are you today?
Good morning, Will. How are you?
I'm doing great. Before we get started, if you just take a moment to introduce yourself and your connection to the Graves Homeplace.
Well, my name is John Stubbs. I'm a native of Monroe, Louisiana, and found myself restoring my great-grandparents' homestead in a little town south of Monroe, Columbia, Louisiana. Since I was born and raised in North Louisiana, I lived in New York, Washington, D.C., Europe, did a lot of international travel with the World Monuments Fund, and then returned to Louisiana to teach at Tulane University, directing its graduate program in historic preservation, during which I came across this amazing project, the possibility of restoring the Graves Homeplace in Columbia. And I busied myself with that for 4 years, and the project was just completed not long ago.
Great, that's awesome. So if you could tell us a little bit about the history, the architecture, about this site, about the Graves Homeplace.
The Graves Homeplace is a remarkable survival of a 19th century river house on the Ouachita River, a cutoff of the Ouachita River, just north of Columbia, Louisiana. There are not many such buildings left in that corner of Louisiana. It is a Greek Revival building built on both sides of the Civil War, which makes it interesting from an architectural standpoint. The rear portion of the building predates the Civil War. It's a simple, maybe it was a tenant's house. It's called a double house or a saddlebag house. But the front part of the building, that's the public face of the building, facing Davis Lake, is the Greek Revival story and a half wood frame building with simple pitched roof. And that was added after the Civil War. So you have an interesting, good design of a Greek Revival building and I've restored it to the look that it had in its highest period of development from 1840, but its oldest parts are around 1850.
So it sounds like it's got a little bit of different eras, different styles kind of put together, but it's survived till today. What does it mean to the community, and why is it important to save this structure? I know it has a lot of family ties to you personally, but why is it important to the community, and why is it important to save something like this?
Well, one of the joys of this project has been to reconnect with my roots. You don't have many opportunities in a lifetime to restore your family's home. And I saw this as the last opportunity in my family. And I convinced my cousins to sell me the thing at a reasonable price. And so I took it on with a deep interest in preservation. And in doing so, I was so warmly received by the citizens of that area, Caldwell Parish, in part because I come from those very people, and they remembered, the old timers in the neighborhood, in the community especially, remembered Dr. J.Q. Graves, my grandfather, and it's all through the archives and newspapers, the history of my family in that area. But everyone had left the area and moved to the big town of Monroe, Louisiana, 35 miles away, from which the family grew further and so on. Anyway, this resulted in the place being a farm that my family inherited, on my mother's side, inherited. And at a reunion in Cashiers, North Carolina, it was decided to sell the old farmstead before the family got bigger and so on and so forth. So I popped up and said, as Mr. Preservation, what about the old homestead? And the family said, I don't know, let's tear it down or sell it for wood or something like that. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. This is our last chance to save an ancestral home. Long story short, lots of blood, sweat, and tears later, it has been restored by December 2021. And so it did mean a lot to the community in the process of my working there. I met everybody. They were the mayor and the tax assessor and the historians and the librarians and the other antiquarians in the area were thrilled to have someone come and do this sort of preservation work in the area like they've been doing. So I'm in great company among the friendliest people ever, and have fit in rather well. And the place is now an amenity for them to enjoy as well. We've had many public events there, fundraisers and the like. And I think what I've really done is just bring something back from the dead to be used again as a productive piece of real estate.
That's quite the story. A lot of people involved and a lot of realize that people appreciate the history and the landscape of their community.
In relation to that, Will, I might add that I probably went through 50 different craftsmen and electricians and plumbers and you name it, and met everybody in relation to that. Not all of them could handle it, but I certainly met everybody. And they all found it fascinating because it was more than just a house restoration. It involved the restoration of 7 acres of land on a beautiful lake. And it was complicated, but not impossible.
Sure. So that brings us to our next question. You know, what was some of the processes or resources or tools that you used in the restoration project? What was the first thing you did when you formally acquired the property? What type of assessments or conditions did you need to evaluate it? And where did you get started, and how did you address each element to get to the final restoration?
How did we go about it? Well, I asked for a period of an allowance from the family who were anxious to sell the place. Give me 2 months to just let me clear it out and see what I have to work with. And I'm not exaggerating to say that the place was a dump when I started. It had been used and abused by tenant farmers since the 1930s. My grandmother moved out of there in 1934, and it had since been used by tenant farmers who were hoarders. And I'm not exaggerating. We had a lot of work and a lot of fun cleaning out of 7 20-yard dumpsters of debris, nothing of value, just cardboard, plastic, just junk. And after that, we realized that it really was a good, solid house. And so from that point forward, we did what you normally do with such a building: deal with the envelope, the exterior, the roof, the windows, the walls. There are 17 sets of 6x6 double hung windows in the building. I took them back home to New Orleans with me and restored them one at a time, preserving the old wavy glass in each one, and then took them back to Columbia to, first of all, button it up from the weather and restore the exterior. But we were underway as well doing the structural work inside. It didn't need much structural enhancement, but it did need wiring and a lot of finish work. But the theory was to leave as much original fabric there as possible. It's really eligible for the National Register. I hope it's listed. It's been nominated already. I hope it's listed soon. And I worked from the front end of the house to the back, like you would wash a dog, from the nose to the back, the tail. And so the front rooms are very beautiful. It's a 4-square center hall plan. And remarkably, the whole thing is clad in 4-inch beaded siding, walls, ceilings, even the front porch wall. So that's actually a wonderful building material. Keeps the dust out and the heat in the winter and the like. So, and we went to great lengths to even preserve historic finishes by often there might be a room painted in a sort of a mint green. So we glazed over it with a darker green and we ended up with some really rich coloration in the house. But we tried to be respectful of the original design, the original finishes. Nothing in the floor plan changed. It looks just the way it would have looked in about 1930. And then there was the landscaping that was also very carefully preserved as best we could. There was a lot of cleanup work, a lot of dangerous trees, a lot of vines had grown into the wisteria and taller trees. And that took years to get right because you can't do all of that in one fell swoop. So now it's a preserved, really restored 19th century North Louisiana farmstead and its immediate setting on this really nice lake.
It sounds gorgeous. And, you know, it sounds like the big thing was to clear it and just kind of identify it and you know, take it step by step, room by room. Were there any unexpected challenges or things you that came up beyond just the debris and the cleanup as part of the renovation?
We had to do some floor leveling, found wonderful people in the neighborhood that could do that. That was expensive. The porch on the rear wing had fallen off the building completely and water was pouring into the rear wing. There's a rear roof valley where the rear L joins the rear roof. That had failed together. So there was Niagara Falls and every heavy rain pouring into the house. The chimney, back-to-back chimney in the rear wing collapsed. We saw it coming. It was unstable. It had to be rebuilt. That was a $10,500 repair right there. But we knew what the designs were. We figured that out by one means or another and went back as faithfully as we could with each and everything, making careful improvements. We added insulation where we could. Certainly the wiring has been upgraded. The kitchen is in its original place with modern equipment. They had put bathrooms on the rear porch of the front building in the 1920s, and I put fresh bathrooms in those very same locations. I had a great deal of fun finding salvaged lumber from other parts of the state to use for repairs from and there are salvage yards all over the place, as you know, in New Orleans and Natchez and Jackson, Mississippi. So when I was missing a window type or a door type of a certain kind, it was great fun to search those down. Hardware had to be carefully matched, even down to the screw heads. Are we going to have slotted screws or Phillips head screws? We saw the need to build a couple of outbuildings. There was a chicken coop with a door that was about 5 feet high. That had to have been a chicken coop, slatted walls and all of that for ventilation. And I converted that into a small barn out back to be a shop. And then we just built another little barn in the same manner, and the same general design of the front house are for lawn equipment. So right now it has all the support buildings and to accommodate the stuff we need to run the place. It's a 7-acre parcel on a corner, and the landscape is pretty remarkable. It's got 150-year-old cedar trees out front. It has a giant bamboo patch that occupies about 1.5 acres of the site. It has a huge bull pine tree right in the middle of right on axis with the front door, huge pecan trees, yew trees, magnolias galore. So we went to camellias. I forgot to mention camellias. My great-grandmother would have planted lines of camellias in the front yard that we've been careful to try to restore as well. So it was a great deal of fun, a lot of work, but huge pleasure. And I hope in this interview you're able to see some of the images of before and after. I'm telling you, cleaning that building out was like something out of an archaeological project. It was, we didn't know what we would find, but it was so full of stuff that I think it scared even the rats and the snakes away. So it all went well, but it was a lot of work.
Sounds like you brought both the built environment and the landscape back from the dead, as you mentioned. Our last question here today, you mentioned you completed the major renovation at the end of 2021. So what are the future goals and plans for the site? You know, you've completed the renovation. It's living, breathing place again. What are the plans for the future?
Well, I didn't know what I wanted to do with it when I started it. I just did it out of a sense of duty to both my family and preservation. It just couldn't be lost, this building. And I really didn't know what I would do with it. Well, since then, I've realized that I have to retire at some point, and I am in fact leaving Tulane in such a major way in the coming months. I'll be involved definitely in a less specific way after this coming June, but it's turned out to be, it'll be one of my 2 retirement locations, and it's great for that reason. But it's home. That's the other thing, is I've had a career that's carried me around the world so many times, it's unbelievable. And it's just so nice to be able to return to one's home. And it's really nice to be able to return to one's home and live in an ancestral home. And that's exactly what I'm doing right here. My family on the graveside are buried on the most beautiful cemetery imaginable above Columbia, Louisiana. And I've already picked out my plot to be right next to them someday.
Well, this is a great story. Thank you so much for sharing about the process, your family history, and hopefully our viewers will get some tips and ideas to, you know, take something that's been forgotten and left with junk and bring new life and activity to them again. So thank you again.
My pleasure, Will. All the best.